A man walked into a gathering of believers, laid money at the apostles' feet, and dropped dead. No warning, no argument, no second chance. Everyone in the room saw it happen, and before anyone could fully process what they had just witnessed, his body was carried out and buried. A few hours later, his wife walked in, unaware of what had happened. She was given a chance to speak, a chance to tell the truth, but instead she said the same thing he did, and she fell dead too. Two people, one decision, the same outcome. So what did they actually do, and why was the response so immediate? In the book of Acts, beginning in chapter 4 and moving into chapter 5, the scene is set in the early days of the believers after the resurrection and ascension of Jesus. What is described is not just a group of people gathering, it is the church taking shape, formed around shared belief, shared purpose, and a clear understanding of what they are part of. Acts chapter 4 verse 32 says that the believers were of one heart and one soul. That is not just language about agreement. It reflects a level of unity that shows up in how they live. They are no longer holding tightly to what they own as individuals. Instead, there is a shift in how they see their possessions. What they have is now something that can be used to support others within the church. Because of that, a pattern begins to form. Those who have more begin to sell their possessions and bring the proceeds to the apostles. Acts chapter 4 verse 34 through 35 explains that those who owned lands or houses sold them and brought the money, laying it at the apostles' feet, and it was distributed to each as any had need. This is not presented as a command. There is no instruction that everyone must give up what they have. The giving is voluntary. It flows from a willingness to make sure that no one among them lacks what they need. And because it is voluntary, something else becomes important: trust. When the money is brought and laid at the apostles' feet, it is received as what it is claimed to be. There is no indication of hidden terms, partial truth, or private agreements behind what is presented publicly. What is given matches what is being presented. That consistency is part of what holds the church together. One man is mentioned by name to show what this looks like in practice. In Acts chapter 4, verse 36 through 37, Joseph, who is also called Barnabas, sells a field that belongs to him and brings the money, placing it before the apostles. There is no indication that anything is held back. What is presented is understood to be complete. This moment matters because it establishes the environment in which the next events take place. Generosity is happening, but more importantly, honesty is assumed. People are not just responding to need, they are responding to what they believe God is doing among them. There is a shared understanding that what they are part of is not ordinary, and because of that, how they act within the church carries weight. There is also visibility. These actions are not hidden. When someone sells something and brings the money, it is known, it is seen. Others are aware of it, not for recognition, but because it is part of how the church is functioning. And this creates a setting where actions can easily be compared, not in a competitive sense, but in a visible one. What one person does is seen by others. What is given is known, and what is brought forward is accepted at face value. This is where Ananias and Sapphira enter the story. They are part of the same church. They are not outsiders observing from a distance. They see what is happening. They understand the pattern. They are aware of how others are giving and how those gifts are being received. And at some point, they decide to take part in that same process. They also sell a piece of property. On the surface, their action looks no different from what has already been happening. But what matters in this story is not just that they gave, it is how they chose to present what they gave. And that decision has already been made before they ever step forward. Ananias and Sapphira were not acting in isolation. They had seen what was happening in the church. They understood the pattern. People were selling what they had, bringing the proceeds, and laying it at the apostles' feet. There was a clear connection between what was given and how it was presented. What was brought forward was understood to be complete. At some point, they made a decision to follow that same outward action. In the book of Acts, chapter 5, verse 1, it says, "But a man named Ananias, with his wife Sapphira, sold a piece of property." That word "but" introduces a shift, because what follows looks similar on the surface, but is different underneath. Up to this point, nothing is out of place. There is no issue with owning the land, and there is no issue with selling it. There is also no requirement that they give all of the money. That becomes clear in what Peter says later. The decision of how much to give was entirely theirs. But before anything is brought forward, something else happens. Acts chapter 5, verse 2 says that Ananias kept back for himself some of the proceeds with his wife's knowledge. This was not a private, individual choice. They were in agreement. Together, they decide to keep back part of the money from the sale. And at the same time, they plan to present the portion they did bring as if it were the full amount. This is the turning point, because the issue is not the amount they keep. The issue is the decision to present something partial as if it were complete. When Ananias comes forward, he brings a portion of the money and lays it at the apostles' feet. Outwardly, his action looks identical to what others have done. There is no visible difference in the moment. If someone were watching without knowing the full situation, it would appear that he is doing the same thing as everyone else. But what is hidden from the church is not hidden from God. Peter addresses him directly. In Acts chapter 5, verse 3, he says, "Ananias, why has Satan filled your heart to lie to the Holy Spirit and to keep back for yourself part of the proceeds of the land?" This question goes straight to the center of what has happened. It is not framed as a misunderstanding. It is identified as a lie, and not just a lie to people, but a lie to the Holy Spirit. Then Peter makes something clear that removes any misunderstanding about pressure or obligation. In verse 4, he says, "While it remained unsold, did it not remain your own? And after it was sold, was it not at your disposal?" The land belonged to Ananias. The money belonged to Ananias. There was no requirement forcing him to give it all. There was no expectation that he had to present the full amount. This means the decision to give less would not have been the problem. The problem is that he chose to present it as more than it was. Peter finishes by saying, "You have not lied to man but to God." That statement shifts the weight of the moment. This is no longer about a financial decision. It is about truth before God. Ananias did not need to participate in the same way as others. He did not need to match what Barnabas or anyone else had done. But instead of acting within what was true, he chose to create the appearance of something that was not. And that is what brings the situation to a point that cannot be undone. Because once something false is presented as true in a setting built on truth, it does not remain small. It affects everything around it. And in that moment, the decision that was made privately is now being exposed publicly. The moment Peter finishes speaking, there is no pause, no further questioning, and no time for Ananias to respond. The words have already exposed what was hidden, and immediately everything changes. In the book of Acts chapter 5, verse 5, it says, "When Ananias heard these words, he fell down and breathed his last." There is no gradual decline, no extended moment where others try to intervene, no opportunity to explain or correct what was done. The consequence is immediate. The truth is revealed, and the response follows without delay. Those who are standing there witness it happen in real time. A man who walked in moments earlier, appearing no different than anyone else, is now lying dead on the ground, and just as quickly as it happens, the scene moves forward. Verse 6 says, "The young men rose and wrapped him up and carried him out and buried him." There is no delay in this process, no gathering of the wider church, no extended discussion. The situation is handled with urgency and finality. What has happened is not treated as something uncertain. It is understood. And the effect on those who are present is clear. The end of verse 5 says, "Great fear came upon all who heard of it." This is not confusion. It is not uncertainty about what just took place. The connection between what Ananias did and what has happened to him is understood. The issue is not misunderstood as a mistake or coincidence. It is seen for what it is. What was presented as true has been exposed as false, and the response has been immediate. And this moment carries weight beyond just one individual, because it establishes something about the church. Up to this point, the church has been marked by unity, generosity, and trust. What people brought forward was accepted as honest. What was given was treated as real. Now, it becomes clear that this is not a setting where something can be misrepresented without consequence. This is not simply a group of people managing shared resources. God is present in what is happening, and what is done in that setting is not just seen by others, it is known fully. Peter had already said in verse 4, "You have not lied to man but to God." Now that statement is no longer just words. It has been confirmed in what has taken place. The speed of the response removes any assumption that there will always be time to address something later. There is no indication that Ananias expected this outcome. He came forward with a plan already in place. He carried out the action he and Sapphira had agreed on. From his perspective, everything may have appeared controlled, but the moment he is confronted with the truth, the situation does not unfold the way he likely expected. There is no opportunity to adjust, no chance to correct the presentation, no space to explain intent. The consequence follows immediately after the truth is revealed. And the result is not just personal, it affects everyone who witnesses it. Because now, the understanding of what it means to be part of the church has shifted. It is no longer just about participation, it is about truth. And at this point in the story, Sapphira has not yet entered the room. Acts chapter 5, verse 7 makes that clear. She is still outside, unaware of what has just taken place, but the decision they made together is about to be tested again. About 3 hours pass. The church has already witnessed what happened to Ananias. His body has been carried out and buried. The weight of that moment is still present among those who remain. What just took place was not ordinary, and it has not been forgotten. Then Sapphira enters. In the book of Acts, chapter 5, verse 7, it says that she came in, not knowing what had happened. She walks into the same setting, carrying the same understanding she had before. From her perspective, nothing has changed, but everything has. The truth has already been exposed. The consequence has already been carried out. The church has already seen what happens when something false is presented as true. And now she stands in that same place, unaware that the moment she is stepping into has already been defined by what has taken place before her. And before anything else happens, she is given a direct opportunity. Peter asks her a simple, specific question. In Acts chapter 5, verse 8, he says, "Tell me whether you sold the land for so much." The question is clear. It does not leave room for confusion. It gives her the chance to respond truthfully. At this point, the situation is no longer hidden. Ananias had already acted. The deception had already been exposed. And now Sapphira stands in a moment where she can either separate herself from that decision or confirm it. She answers yes for so much. With that response, she repeats the same claim. This is not a rushed answer. It is not something said under pressure in the middle of confusion. She is being asked directly, and she gives a direct answer. And in doing so, she confirms the agreement that had been made earlier. Peter responds by addressing that agreement. In Acts chapter 5, verse 9, he says, "How is it that you have agreed together to test the Spirit of the Lord?" This statement makes clear that what happened was not accidental. It was not a misunderstanding. It was a shared decision carried out intentionally. This was not just one person acting alone. They were in agreement. Then he tells her something that brings the moment to its conclusion. He says, "Behold, the feet of those who have buried your husband are at the door, and they will carry you out." This is not a warning meant to change the outcome. It is a declaration of what is about to happen. There is no delay between the statement and what follows. Acts chapter 5, verse 10 says, "Immediately she fell down at his feet and breathed her last." The same outcome, the same finality. The young men enter, find her dead, carry her out, and bury her beside her husband. The pattern is complete. Both had the same opportunity, both made the same decision, and both faced the same result. What stands out in this moment is not just the consequence, it is the clarity of the opportunity she was given. She was not confronted in the same way Ananias was. She was asked a question, a direct chance to speak truth, and in that moment the outcome could have been different. But she chose to remain aligned with the decision they had made together, even when given the opportunity to step away from it. And just like before, the response is immediate, not delayed, not partial, not open to revision. The decision is confirmed and the consequence follows. With both Ananias and Sapphira now gone, the moment settles over the entire church. This is no longer an isolated incident. What happened was seen, what happened was heard, and what happened is now understood by everyone connected to it. In the book of Acts, chapter 5, verse 11, it says, "Great fear came upon the whole church and upon all who heard of these things." This response is immediate, just like everything else in the story. But this fear is not confusion. It is not panic without understanding. It is a clear recognition of what has just taken place. The church now understands something that may not have been fully grasped before, that what they are part of is not casual. Up to this point, they had seen generosity, they had seen unity, they had seen people give freely and support one another. The church was marked by trust, and that trust was built on the assumption that what was brought forward was true. Now that understanding is deeper, because this moment makes it clear that God is not just present in what they are doing, He is actively aware of it. And what is presented before Him cannot be separated from what is true. Ananias and Sapphira were not judged for giving less. That is made clear earlier in the story. In Acts chapter 5, verse 3, Peter says, "Why has Satan filled your heart to lie to the Holy Spirit?" And in verse 4, he says, "You have not lied to man but to God." The land was theirs. The money was theirs. They were not required to give all of it. The issue was not the amount. It was the decision to present something as true when it was not. And in a church built on shared trust and open action, that kind of decision does not remain hidden. It is exposed. And once it is exposed, it changes how everything is understood moving forward, because now there is clarity, not just about generosity, but about integrity. What is done publicly must match what is true privately. What is brought forward must reflect what it actually is. There is no space for presenting one thing while holding back another in a way that misrepresents reality. And this moment establishes that clearly. It also reinforces something else, that being part of what God is doing is not just about participation, it is about truth, not appearance, not alignment on the surface, but what is actually real. And that understanding spreads beyond just those who were present. Acts chapter 5 verse 11 makes that clear. It comes upon the whole church and upon all who hear about it, because the story carries weight, not because of how unusual it is, but because of what it reveals, that God is not indifferent to how he is represented, and that what is done in his name carries meaning beyond the moment. This is what the story reveals, that God is not looking at what is shown outwardly alone. He sees what is real. This story does not leave room for the idea that there will always be time to correct what is hidden later. Ananias had no opportunity to adjust once the truth was exposed. Sapphira was given a direct opportunity to speak truth and chose not to. And in both cases, the moment was final, not extended, not delayed, final. So the question this leaves is not about what others see. It is about what is actually true, because what is true will be revealed. And when it is, there may not be another moment to change it. If this made you stop and think, take a moment and be honest with yourself. Are you being real before God? Or are you presenting something that looks right on the outside? Comment, I choose truth, if this is something you want to walk in. And if you want more clear, grounded Bible stories like this, subscribe and share this with someone who needs to hear it.